Good morning, happy Friday. So, in uh, in the Tony world, we talk about not suffering for more than 90 seconds. That we're not going to let ourselves suffer for more than 90 seconds. And what do we mean by that? What we mean is, we're going to have these states. We're going to have these responses where something happens and then we, don't react to that well or aren't happy about that. But the standard then is we're not going to stay there for more than 90 seconds. And then we're going to move on and we're either going to solve the problem or we're going to figure it out or we're going to change our state. Remember, state management is the number one thing. If you have state management, you have everything. If you don't have state management, then you have nothing. So where does suffering come from? Well, when you're suffering, it's actually a selfish state. You're actually worried about yourself, if you think about it. If you're worried about others, you're not suffering. Now, people say, well, but I am worried about others. I'm worried about my child or I'm worried about my spouse. But when you're worried about your child or your spouse, most of the time, really, you're actually worried about yourself. If you're worried about somebody else, being injured, or you're actually worried about your response to that. Suffering comes from three things: loss, less, never. It comes from feeling that you're going to lose something, that something's not good enough, or that something's never going to happen. And suffering is almost always a selfish state. And we talked about that the high energy emotions are the positive ones and the low energy emotions are the negative ones. Suffering is obviously a low energy emotion, but really it always comes out of fear, right? I mean, anytime we have any low energy emotions, it's because we're afraid. And remember that fear always comes down to two things: I'm not enough, and I won't be loved. We could have a million fears: failure, success, rejection, but it always comes down to those two. I'm not enough, and because I'm not enough, I won't be loved. So suffering really all comes from loss, less, never, and you feel the loss, less, never because of those two fears. I'm not enough and I won't be loved. That's the whole shooting match. That's where it all comes. So when we say that we want to end suffering, what we're saying is stop living in fear. Stop worrying about loss, less, or never. Stop focusing on what might not happen. And when things happen that aren't the way that they're supposed to be, instead of being in suffering, instead of being in loss, less, never, where do you go? Gratitude. Be grateful. Figure out what you can be grateful for, which there's always a million things. And when remember, when you change expectations to appreciation, then all suffering ends. So that's the same thing that we're talking about. When you go to appreciation from expectation, you're leaving loss, less, or never, and you're leaving fear. And when you do all that, now you're not suffering, now you're appreciating. And remember, that means you're going to come from a different state, which means your approach is going to be completely different, which means your responses are going to be completely different, which means your actions are going to be completely different, which means your outcomes are going to be completely different. If you're in a resourceful state and your boss walks in and says you're fired, what's your response if you're in a resourceful state? Thank you. It's the perfect time for me to start my own business. Or thank you. There's a million jobs out there and you never appreciated me and I can't wait to find a boss that does. If you're in a resourceful state and your significant other breaks up with you, what do? You walk out in the middle of the street and you scream, "Next!" You're ready for the next person because that person didn't appreciate you and wasn't the right person anyway, and thank God that relationship is over. That's the difference between living life in suffering and living life in appreciation and in resourceful states. And when you live in those resourceful states, then your responses to life is going to be completely different. I hope that makes sense. Have a great Friday, everybody. Go Bucks! Bucks play tonight against the Hawks, and I get to attend. Thanks for watching. We're all in this together. Let's take care of each other.